Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 4 of the Digital Equity Capacity Grant webinar series. My name is Michelle Kim, and I'm a Community and Economic Development Educator with University of Illinois Extension, and I will be standing in for Nancy Wodrago today. I want to thank the Illinois Department of Commerce, Office of Broadband, and Illinois Broadband Lab for joining us again. Thank you to Ling Ling Lu for the role that you've played in this series, and I'll now turn things over to you for introductions and objectives.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Good afternoon, and welcome to everyone who's tuned in to this webinar. My name is Ling Ling Lu. I am a Community Engagement Manager with the Illinois Office of Broadband. Today, you are attending the webinar titled Leveraging Data for Storytelling. This is the last piece of a series of webinars that the goal is to build capacity among our stakeholders, because we want to make sure that this upcoming Illinois Digital Equity Capacity Grant is equitable for you to access. And that is why we're presenting webinars on topics that equip you with the tools and information to help you take advantage of this upcoming grant opportunity. With me today are three wonderful speakers that will later on introduce themselves. We will have Shubika, who is the Assistant Director of Broadband Data and Geoanalytics with the Illinois Broadband Lab. And we have Kyla Williams-Tate, who's the Director of Digital Equity with Cook County Office of the President. And we have Samantha Harnack, who is the Director of Grow Hancock with us today. Here is a brief agenda to see how we'll be spending our time today. I will be providing some high-level context about the Digital Equity Capacity Grant here in Illinois, and then Shubika is going to take over to cover leveraging data for storytelling, and then our two wonderful community speakers will showcase how they've leveraged data in the different work that they've done out in the community. And finally, we are going to save the questions at the very end. So feel free to put all the questions that you may have throughout the webinar in the chat, and we'll address them at the very end. Our objectives today is to understand common terms around data, understand why data is important for different organizations for different purposes. Also, you will be able to learn how to find relevant broadband and digital equity data, and be able to explore ways to incorporate data at different phases of your work for different reasons, such as writing a grant proposal, scoping a project, report out your program impact, building public or private partnerships in your community. Here is a reminder that all the recordings and slides of our past webinars are documented and listed on this website, which I will drop in the chat in a minute. We also have added a new section on this website that we call Digital Equity Resources. So these are links to different resources such as digital skills curriculums, DE population viewer, digital skills library, digital navigator models and training resources, etc. So this will be a living document that we will be adding resources to as we come across them. So feel free to check back regularly if you're needing resources to help build your digital equity program. Next, we're moving on to the grant context. As you all know, earlier this year, the Digital Equity Plan with the Illinois State has been approved, which means that we have submitted our Illinois application to NTIA to receive our allocation of the funding to implement this plan. There are 5 core activities to this plan, and the Digital Equity Grant Program is one of the 5 core elements of our implementation. We are actively drafting the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the Illinois State Digital Equity Capacity Grant, and we're hoping to launch it next month. Just as a reminder, these are the tentative grant project areas that we're currently considering to include in our Notice of Funding Opportunity. These include device distribution programs, digital literacy and skills training, digital navigation and technology support, broadband affordability program, access expansion feasibility studies, and finally, coalition building. Also, as a reminder that this funding is coming from NTIA, and one requirement is that our work prioritizes our covered populations. And I have them all listed out here for you to go through. For many of you, this would be a familiar information. It's important to note that 72% of all Illinoisans are part of these identity groups, and these are communities that have been disproportionately impacted by digital inequities that exist in our state. And finally, before I pass it over to Shubika, reminder to please fill out our partner intake form if you're not already part of our contact list. And also for any questions that you may have about our work, feel free to email us at broadband@illinois.gov. And next, I will be passing this over to Shubika. I think you will be sharing your own screen. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Ling Ling. Awesome. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and are we seeing the presentation? Okay, awesome. I see head nods. So good afternoon, everybody. Shubika Agarwal with the Illinois Broadband Lab. So I'm going to try my best to share with folks how the different sources and what could really be helpful with data while you're sharing your story for some of the digital equity grants and opportunities that we have ahead of us. And because I'm going to be sharing a few different screens, I'm using this presentation view, but if at any point it's difficult to read anything, just let me know and I can probably switch to the presenter view with the full slides. So starting off with why data and how it's can be really helpful in sharing impactful stories for your community. So it can be a super important and helpful tool for decision making. If you're a local government or a nonprofit with allocating resources, designing your programs, or just generally identifying community needs. And this is also true for internet service providers who might be doing work around digital equity. So definitely a foundation for decision making. Helping drive strategic planning. So how do you really prioritize different initiatives, monitor progress, and then adjust your strategies and programs based on the needs of the community and the efficiency of the program so far. It's a very helpful way to build trust and transparency with stakeholders, just so they're aware of how the funding is being used, for example, in case of a grant program, and just also able to know a little bit more about what's really happening within their community with respect to digital equity. It helps empower communities to better understand their challenges and participate in shaping solutions, because a lot of times, the ambiguity around the word digital equity. So again, as you think of using data, it's how do we break it down easily and make it accessible for folks who we'd really want to hear from in this process. It helps unlocking trends and patterns, again, which can help in decision making, and build a compelling story which can inspire action, drive policy, and help secure funding. So these are a few different things of why you might be interested in looking at data for some of these initiatives. So now, just to level set, wanted to go through some of the common terms that we'll be using in the presentation. Meanwhile, I'd also encourage folks to just share a brief intro in the chat so that we have a sense of who's here with us. Do we have local governments, nonprofits? Do we have folks from ISPs as well? So that moving forward, I can basically try and tailor my presentation accordingly. So while we have folks doing that, to go over some of the common terms, data essentially starting off with the raw facts and figures and information that we might have collected from various different sources. When we organize it in a manner that helps us to further analyze it, we would call it a data set. So it's more organized, we can make sense of it and use that for further analysis. A lot of times before we move to analysis, there is a step called data cleaning, where we can remove certain attributes that might not be helpful for analysis or some errors or inconsistencies with the data. So a lot of times if you're working with survey data, there might be indicators where people have not responded to a specific question, or there might be just outliers in terms of some responses just being on different ends of the spectrum that might skew your results. So data cleaning essentially would be just taking an overall look at the data set and trying to make sure that it's consistent and there are no inaccuracies. And then we can proceed with the next step, which would be data analysis. So this is where we would really inspect the data and try and use different statistical tools to try and make sense of it so that we're able to draw conclusions, which can then be used for some of the decision-making aspect of it. And again, for folks who have had experience with this, tables, maps, figures, all of that makes super sense to us. But when communicating some of this to the public, the stakeholders, or just like, presenting data, we come up with the concept of data visualization. So it's basically representing a lot of this in charts, graphs, or maps so that it's easier for the audience to just digest a lot of this information. A lot of times we also use key performance indicators. So these are measurable metrics that can help track the performance and effectiveness of the project, the process, or anything that we're specifically looking at. There are two different types of data, quantitative data and qualitative data. So as the name might kind of suggest, quantitative data is usually numeric. This is what a lot of us might have seen in reports, and like, X% of households have access to internet, a lot of that. And then we have the qualitative, which really helps support a lot of this quantitative data and add a lot more of meaning and context to some of this. So it is non-numeric, and it can provide more details about the characteristics or attributes, and it could be gathered through interviews, surveys, or different observations made through like the work in the past. We will also be looking at a few dashboards. Again, this is a way of data visualization, making it easier for folks to get an understanding at a glance of various different KPIs or the key performance indicators, and just like a thematic version of the data that you want to be sharing. Similarly with infographics, so a visual representation of a lot of these conclusions and being able to communicate that complex information more quickly and clearly so that it makes sense to the audiences. So I'm gonna quickly go into the chat and try and get a sense of who all we have here. Thank you so much for your responses in the chat. I think we have a good representation from counties, school departments, some internet service providers as well, nonprofits. So yeah, it seems like a really good mix here. Moving on, here we have an example of an infographic from the State Digital Equity Plan. So we see how there's different statistics and a little more description so that it makes sense for folks who are kind of utilizing data. Wanted to share that. Now, again, want to make this as interactive as possible. And if we're able to share in the chat, how many of us have previously had an experience with working with data and how exactly have we used it? It could be for grant purposes, for example, for an internal study that your local government is doing, but just generally want to get a sense of who's really worked with data in the past and for what reasons. Could be a real quick. You can also unmute yourself if you'd like to do that. Or we could also just have hand raises or thumbs up for folks who have engaged with data in the past. So yes, needs assessment and impact reporting. Exactly, that's a good example. We at Porter use Salesforce for internal program measurements in adult ed classes and also report metrics for grants. That's a really good example for tracking progress and grant purposes. Okay, we have folks chiming in. So yeah, that's great. Just let that, keep that coming in the chat and we can move with forward with some of the examples that we've typically seen. So, kind of broken it down into the three categories, recognizing that we have folks from all of these different sections here. And there can be intersectionalities for how you use it, but just generally, I think a lot of times local governments use it for evidence-based policy development, for resource allocation. A lot of us in the past have used ARPA funding or local funding that's available to state governments for broadband infrastructure and digital equity programming. So just like how much of that allocation needs to be made could be dependent on the data and the underlying need in the community. And again, transparent performance tracking so that the residents know how the funding is being used, the progress, and all of that. With nonprofits, again, we have had some of this come in the chat, but tracking program impact or effectiveness, identifying target population areas, and optimizing the service delivery, strengthening advocacy and funding. So again, a lot of this required for grant purposes. So a lot of nonprofits and local governments also using it for that. Internet service providers for strategic network expansion, enhanced customer understanding. Again, because I realize that a lot of our service providers are also now working on digital equity efforts. So, some of this information can be super helpful for them. And again, reporting and compliance purposes. So, reading out a few more responses we have in the chat. So, Anne Slaughter says, I think with the library, our data team collects and aggregates data for us to use in decision making, assessment, and reporting to stakeholders, and also provides knowledge building opportunities. Exactly. Really like that. With UC2B, analysis of current program progress and future planning. Exactly. How do we do some of that? Performance reporting, matching to budget allocations, strategic planning, and grant proposals. Great. So some of us have used this and definitely covers a wide spectrum of, things listed here on the slide. So that's great. Now, just wondering, because we'll have a lot of this coming in the future slides. So a lot of times data geography matters. So if you want to share in the chat the area of interest for your projects, just generally, was it at the county level? We have school districts here, we have libraries here, so maybe library districts for some of you, school districts for some of you might be looking at the entire state. So what has your experience been with using data, the level of granularity that you have used it for? So you can keep that coming in the chat, but just wanted to bring this up because as we look at different data sources and different needs, I think the granularity of data is, again, a super important aspect to look at. Moving on, data sources is also a lot of what we'll be discussing. Again, it's not a super exhaustive list that we've put together, but it's a good starting point if you're an organization who's just starting to look at some of this data. And I think it'll be really helpful to get some of those in the chat as well, data sources, but we've tried to compile a pretty good list of where you can really get started if you haven't really looked at some of these data sets previously. So a lot of us have worked with county data sets, rural areas, previous work in community health. We looked at the census tract level. That's great. Community areas, historically limited, Champaign-Urbana, county-wide data, county and municipal cities and villages. Yeah, great. So we have, again, folks looking at different geographies, different granularities with some of this data. So in the next couple of slides, what we're going to do is look at different sections of why would you really want to look at this data set? How would it be helpful? What kind of a story will it help tell? And then what are some of the different data sources that can help you get information to frame that storyline? So starting off with broadband availability data. So what kind of attributes will we find here? A lot of times this has to do with the different speeds available, the different technology available, the different providers in the area. A lot of times with access, it's also to do with the competition which can impact the different prices that's available in the community. So that's a good piece of information with the availability data. A lot of times, we have the grant eligibility information from a lot of these different sources listed here, and we can also get a sense of prior state and federal grant program areas. So again, this could be helpful in knowing areas of need which do not have access, which do not have prior funding, and where exactly does some of that future funding need to go. So we have our state Illinois broadband map. We have had different tutorials for that, a lot of different layers going on there. We are trying to simplify this for future purposes. So I'm not going to be demonstrating that today in this webinar, but we do have resources that we can share later on so that you have a better sense of how to navigate this if you haven't in the past. Then we have the FCC broadband map, which is again the FCC's version of this, data available at the location level. We've had past webinars on this, and it really helps you get a sense of different providers, speeds, and technology available at different locations across the country, really. The two other sources that we have listed here are the USAC Connect America Fund Map. So I think this is a really good tool to look at the progress that has been made towards some of the prior grant funding, a lot of the federal programs really. And then we have the broadband funding map, which again tells us the different areas that have been funded through previous federal programs. And then also wanted to mention that a lot of you are familiar with the BEAD program, the infrastructure funding that's coming through the FCC. So we will have more, detailed breakdown of eligible locations by county in the future. But just to demonstrate a few of these sources, mostly the USAC Connect America map and then the broadband funding map over here quickly. Again, these could be webinars in themselves, but we haven't spoken about these so much in the past. So let's take a quick look. Here's the broadband funding map. Again, there's a lot of tabs here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at all of this information, but some of these that might be helpful to look at. So when we go on to the area summary, this is basically going to tell us coverage available, whether without any kind of funding, that's the dark green color here. The light green is essentially coverage, meaning that particular speed of 0.2 by 0.2 is available through some kind of funding. If there's a yellow in here, that basically is funding is available, but there's no other kind of existing coverage at the speed reflected at the bottom. And the red really shows that at this particular speed, there is no coverage nor funding available for those amount of units. So we can start off at the state level and just look at the stats for Illinois. And just wanted to flag that with a lot of these tools, we also have the filter option. So we with BEAD, the eligibility is all wired and licensed fixed wireless. So we want to probably select that, and speeds greater than 100 by 20 is what would be considered served. So we get a sense of, what is that different distribution across different speeds in terms of coverage and funding. And the colors on the map are essentially the darker the blue, the more unserved and unfunded locations in that area. So again, as you're thinking of how this data could be leveraged, a lot of times with digital equity efforts, there is a need for distributing hotspots in the community, making sure there's availability for devices and things like that. So access is one piece that can help start that storyline, saying that, this area in my community does not currently have access to broadband, and that is the reason I'd like to target my device distribution or hotspot distribution in this particular area. So that could be a good starting point. And again, you can actually look at this data for different levels. You can also do places, congressional districts, counties. Let's probably look at one county. Just thought of Shelby, the first one that came to mind right now. So you can also look at it county level, and again, similar kind of breakdown for some of this. Again, there's a lot here. We'll probably have, like, we could do a separate video on this. So if you have questions, definitely put that in the chat, and we'll move on to some of the other data sources here. Okay. And we also wanted to quickly look at the USAC Connect America map. So I'm going to copy the link and take a quick look at this. So this is for the progress made towards prior federal funding. So for the sake of example, looking at RDOF, and again, one key feature with a lot of these maps are filters that we can work with. So always look out for those. We're interested for Illinois, and the program that I've selected is the RDOF funding. And we'll probably look at all of the providers and all of the speeds. So zooming into the map, and there's always a legend if you want to make sense of colors. So the green is all the eligible area, and then we look at the different dots here. So this is where funding has already been deployed, and so the access is there for the different speeds. We can also click on these for details on the speeds available and the filing year, and which internet service provider basically provided this service here. And then all of this is also summarized in the table below. So this could be a good resource, again, to look at the progress made towards some of these past funding in the community. So this could help start the conversation about access. Moving on to socioeconomic need, again, when we're taking an example of a grant application that we're writing, a lot of times we need to be providing information about the socioeconomic need in the community. And again, this is important because kind of realizing that, we kind of have gotten to a point where we realize that access plus digital equity is super important, and everybody in this state and in the country should really have it. But there's limited funding that's available out there. So this is a really good way of just showing that we understand the community and highlighting those different areas that could really, use this funding that's coming in. So this would be demographic data that we include in there, different race and ethnic minorities information. As Ling Ling mentioned previously, the different covered populations. So we might want to highlight some of that need in our community, the economic need through variables like income, poverty levels, and also maybe populations that subscribe to different government assistance programs, because again, there are different eligibility for those. And the more we have some of those low income populations who also qualify for some of these programs, it could help highlight that need in the community. So a few data sources that we have here, again, census, having a lot of this available at different geographies. So a lot of you mentioned census tracts, census places, county level data, and also at the state level. So a lot of this would be available through census. There's also a tool called IPUMS, which basically has the micro data that is, collected from the US Census and the ACS surveys. So it can be really helpful in some of the data intersectionality. So maybe looking at some of the veterans who qualify for or who are below poverty line, for example. So this is not something that could directly be accessible through the census data, but IPUMS, because it has that micro data, it can easily cut that information into these different parameters and share that with us as well. I've also added a link here to how to download and extract some of this data. This might require some advanced data analysis and processing tools like R or SPSS. So I'm not going to demonstrate this today, but just wanted to share that as a resource if you've had experience with this. We have a few dashboards that our Illini Science Policy scholars at the office had created for some of the statistics that's included in the State Digital Equity Plan around demographics, internet use, and household income. So we have some of that we can look at. And then there's also the program eligibility. So now with the ACP, a lot of us who've worked with this know that this was available at the zip code level. Then SNAP has a resource where the data is available at the congressional district level. So it kind of depends. As we are sharing this data, we could just, if there is a constraint that for SNAP, the least granular data set that I'm able to find is just the congressional district, for example, then if I fall within or my community falls within that district, I could just use the example of that to frame my narrative and need in the community. So that is the reason geography kind of plays an important part here. We must try and find the most granular, but even if it's like at a higher level, we can certainly just point to that data set and also share the geography so that it makes sense to the person reviewing the application, but nonetheless conveys the need in the community. Then we have the National School Lunch Program eligibility. So again, because this is collected at the school district level. We have the SAIPE data, which is again for income and poverty. This is available at school district, county, and state levels. And then we have some USDA data sets on distressed communities and socially vulnerable communities. So a lot of this, again, bringing us back to why should this funding be given to this specific community and helping highlight that socioeconomic need through these different measures here. A quick look at time. Also wanted to demo the census data, but I think I'll leave that to the end if we have time on how to just work through this site and just extract data. So if we have time towards the end, I can demonstrate some of that. If we have any questions, please do share them in the chat. And again, if there are some different data sources that you might have used in the past for some of this, definitely welcome all of that as well. Moving on, so now looking at some of the interests in the community. So a lot of times with grant applications, that just being like the most common example for why we might use data. So starting there, it's really helpful for them to know that we've already worked in the community and we have a good understanding of what the needs are. So different data sets that we could look at would be current subscription to different providers, that kind of data. How satisfied are the residents with the current service? We can ask questions around affordability and willingness to pay for the internet or devices, just generally. Then speed test data to better understand gaps with existing service, if this is more of an access related application that we might be working on. People interested in signing up for a new service. So a lot of times, even when we have applications for broadband infrastructure, it's helpful to build a case around X number of people would be interested in signing up for my service if I were to build a network in this area because it meets their needs. So that kind of statistic can also be super impactful as part of a grant application. Then I think some of the qualitative data would be the community testimonials for how they feel about existing service, their satisfaction, how they use it for different things. That can be super impactful. And also internet service provider interviews if you're a community that's wanting to expand access in the community. So a few resources here. A lot of this would ideally be through surveys, or if there's surveys that's done in the past, a lot of times that's published in reports by the organization who did it. So that would be a good source to find some of this information. The University of Illinois Extension has been helping us with some of these surveys in the past for some of the broadband breakthrough programs at the county level. So there are some draft survey templates that you could look at for broadband infrastructure and also adoption. And you could probably integrate that in a survey that you might be interested to do in your community. And then we also have a resource for internet service provider interviews, just to, if there's some kind of planning happening there. I think we'll also hear from Samantha on a lot of this because she was part of the broadband breakthrough program with Hancock County, and they've done a really good gone through this entire exercise and have a really good product to share, and more about how they've really used some of these insights in their decision making and next steps. So we'll definitely hear a little more of that. Some of the impact statistics, and again, this is also really helpful in sharing, the work that you've done in the past and how that has helped the community. So this can really be super important in your grant application for some of the digital equity opportunities that are coming. So the stats from previous work, and then it's also helpful to maybe try and link it to, broader issues like how does it really help with access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities in the community? How does it lead to just generally a better quality of life for folks? And again, this would be through different kinds of surveys. And what we are also trying to do is put together a list of metrics to help capture some of this impact and some survey templates that could be helpful in the process. For digital equity, again, there's a lot of different information that you could share around affordability, and this could depend on the kind of work that you're specifically wanting to do in the community. So it could be around broadband affordability, what have been the prior barriers towards adoption, how do people feel about their digital skills and then comfort with using the internet, what do they really use it for, some trends around that, their confidence with using technology, and again, a little more sort of targeted digital equity decision making by highlighting needs in education, workforce, telehealth, agriculture, governance, and it goes on again, depending on the vision of your particular organization. So a few data sources that might be helpful here are the census data. NTIA had an internet use survey that has some of this data. Again, the latest, I think, is 2022. So that can be explored further. And then we have a few different program reports here from different organizations who've been doing surveys for their different target populations. So we have the School District Technology Survey, the National Skill Coalition has been doing some of this around workforce development and the needs on that front. We have a technology use survey on farms that's conducted by USDA. So there are a lot of these local plans and reports that might be available that already have some of this data. So again, this is not a super exhaustive list, but a good starting point to look at some of the needs and existing situation in the community. As Ling Ling had mentioned, we have the IOB partner intake form. So please do fill that out if you haven't. That can be really helpful for the state in building their digital equity asset map in order to build that ecosystem and network in the state. And I know I'm kind of running behind on time, so I'm going to quickly go through these slides so that we have enough time to hear from Kyla and Samantha. So with these, again, it's really important to then turning data into visual stories so that it's easier for people to understand and can drive engagement. On here, we have different types of visualization. It could be maps, charts, graphs, and all of that. And again, the best practice would be so that it's clear and simple, and it's always good to share additional context on some of this. We also have a list of some of the tools that might be helpful for data visualization on the side. And moving on to qualitative data, again, as we mentioned, you can collect it through interviews, focus groups, and surveys. Some of the ways of analyzing this would be through transcribing these, coding these, and trying to get a sense of the sentiment behind, whether people like the service or not, or depending on the kind of data that you're trying to collect. Thematic analysis, and also it's important that we try and get the good and the bad of it, and make sure that we have multiple sources to validate our claims with some of the qualitative data sets. Ways of representing that could be a heat table or coding stripes, or there's also word clouds that a lot of you might have seen. So closing out with a few important tips here and then going on to some of the community presentations. I think it'll be super helpful if you're planning for a grant program, definitely attend their webinars because they have a lot of insights about the scoring and application materials that would be needed. And a lot of times, a lot of these data sources are also provided as resources so that you don't have to look out for data on your own. Quantitative data can be a good starting point, but again, integrating that with qualitative data and local knowledge can go farther. It's really important that data collection is built into program design so that you're able to share some of that impact and effectiveness of the program. Again, qualitative really helping support the quantitative data, and then ensuring that you also have ways to visualize that so that it's easier for folks to engage with that data set. So I'm gonna stop sharing with that and again pass it to Ling Ling so that we know who's gonna be speaking next, and welcome questions in the chat.
Thank you, Shabika. I will pass it over to Kyla to be the next speaker, followed by Sam. And I know we have about 18 minutes left, so you first speakers can condense some of your content. My apologies for rushing you all.
No worries. Thank you for the invitation to share today. I'll be as brief as possible. I'm Kyla Williams-Tate. I'm the Director of Digital Equity here at Cook County Government. Today, I'm going to talk about data-driven digital equity planning and implementation. So we created a strategy that was based on what I call my plan math. If you mix deep research and best practice review with recruiting a guiding team of digital equity champions, create a community-based survey focused on resident voice, add that to some community conversations and some interviews with stakeholders and subject matter experts, do a lot of data analysis, synthesis, and visualization, as Shavika had pointed out. We took all of that and created our inaugural digital equity plan for Cook County. And we started our research at an interesting place. The Internet Equity Initiative has a map that demonstrates some metrics around broadband availability and access, some socioeconomic factors as well. And although their map is focused on large cities, Chicago being one of them, we were able to pull the map out and drill down into our suburban Cook County communities and recognize that more than half of the least connected communities in Cook County actually are in the south suburbs, so the Southland area of our community. And that was important to note from a data-driven decision-making on where we were going to go next in our strategy. So we recruited some guiding team members, more than half representative of that Southland community of disconnectivity, or those communities that have the least connectivity. And we collected all of these super friends, is what I call them, to come together across Cook County, as well as, again, targeted in the Southland, for us to discuss kind of what the challenges were and what they were seeing, programs or projects that they were leading and initiating, so that we can really get a good understanding of what our approach was going to be in community, and figuring out like where the data lies, where the stories were, so that we could get our plan into action. So we decided on this hyper-local approach, an equitable approach. We went all over Cook County, again, doing a lot of deep diving in that Southland area, but we went into other areas of the county that we know are also experiencing disconnectivity and other kind of digital equity gaps. So we were in Cicero, we were in Summit, we were in Harvey. If you look in this bottom right picture, we're actually in the parking lot of a trailer home in the Des Plaines community. We went everywhere and all places, sharing our message around digital equity inclusion, and really encouraging our residents to speak their truth and speak truth to power around their connectivity gaps and their digital skill opportunities or lack thereof. So we released a community-based survey, and we received a lot of respondents, almost over 12,000, almost 13,000 surveys across Cook County. And then we segregated those surveys down to specify which ones were Chicago and which ones were suburban Cook County. And then we also did our survey in a couple of different languages, including Spanish. So we received a goodly amount of surveys back in the residents' native tongue, which we thought was an equitable opportunity. We also did a significant amount of community conversations. We did 12 total. 10 of them, those were in person, and 2 of those were virtual. And we completed a significant amount of what we call our community conversation cards, where we, again, sat with community, had dinner with community, and we conducted some of those community conversations also in Spanish. And we held those all across Cook County. So we were able to get a nice cross-section of opinion. These are quotes that we pulled from some of those community conversations and surveys. Internet access is becoming a necessity of citizenship, so no one should be without it. Way too much, we pay too much and service is inconsistent. It goes out frequently. And of course, again, because we conducted some of these conversations in Spanish, we received some Spanish responses as well. And this translates loosely to that families should be able to receive internet if they have children that are attending school. And this last quote always gets me. The only reason why I'm lucky to have recently gotten access to the internet is because of the help I received as a student. And anytime someone says that they're lucky to have gotten access to the internet, it just hurts my heart, because we know that connectivity is a human right and that everyone should have access to affordable and quality connectivity, no matter where they live, no matter who they are, no matter what their zip code is. Everyone should have access. And so we took all that information and that data and those interviews and conversations, and we synthesized them and analyzed them. And that is what fed into our Cook County Digital Equity Action Plan that we released in October of 2023. Our plan is structured around 4 cornerstones: access, confidence, safety, and infrastructure. And we've created some impact solutions for each of those cornerstones. And impact stands for innovative, measurable, purposeful, actionable, collaborative, and timely. And these are our 12 impact solution recommendations under accessibility, under confidence, under safety, and under infrastructure. And we took all of the work streams that are associated with our impact recommendations and created a little mini dashboard that our guiding team, which is now formally known as our Digital Equity Action Committee, the DEAC, and they have been tracking all of the activity that they've been engaged in based on each of the work streams identified in those cornerstones. So having this dashboard is really helping us to, one, provide our base level of data to be able to build upon and be able to determine if we're being impactful year after year. But it's also an engagement strategy, because people like to contribute and see the numbers go up and see that what they're doing in their respective organizations or entities is really making a difference in our community, which we think is awesome. So again, our guiding team turned into this larger team now known as our Digital Equity Action Committee, because we know it takes many hearts, hands, and minds to be able to do this work. So we are growing our ecosystem in Cook County and have some wonderful organizations that are partnering with us to keep advancing digital equity across the county. As a companion piece to our plan, we also created our own cool little map, which I'm really proud of. This map actually provides a digital equity score per community. So when we go out to do tabling or conversations, we're able to bring this information directly to community to show them what their digital equity impact score is. And how we created these metrics were based on some of the priority areas that our president's office has named in our policy roadmap. So these are all the things that our entire county is working on, and we've tracked it down to a digital equity score. And this is super important, because this, again, will help us to be able to measure our impact as we, reevaluate, and hopefully the scores will be going up as a result of the work that we're doing. And that's my brief presentation. Again, Kyla Williams Tate. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email directly. We created our plan. I'll stop sharing so you can see my face. We created our plan as a guide for others who may need a plan in their area. There's lots of interactive opportunities and guidelines and tools in there for others to adopt. We welcome the opportunity to speak about our plan, or about our map, or any of our work in Cook County. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyla, for sharing your expertise. And I will make sure to include your report and your website in our recap email as well for folks to access. Passing on to Sam.
Hello, everyone. I am Samantha Harnack. As you may hear, that I'm called Sam most of the time. So I'm here in Hancock County, which is significantly different from Cook County in that we are incredibly rural. We have about 17,600 people in our county, according to the 2020 census. Our largest community has about 3,300 people, and that is not growing at this point. What we've realized is that we cannot compete in manufacturing the way that we used to, just based on our proximity. If you don't know where Hancock County is, we're on the Mississippi River where Iowa and Missouri meet. And so that is it makes it difficult because of, honestly, just land taxing, all kinds of things, make it a little bit easier for people to run manufacturing businesses outside of the state, make it really easy for, again, the proximity to those states where we're at. So we had to come up with a really better way to figure things out as far as how to get people to come to Hancock County. And for us, we realized through the pandemic, after that, it was going to have to be, we're going to have to focus from the ground up. And when it was brought to our attention that we were one of 14 counties that basically were, broadband deserts, as they were telling us, we realized we had some work to do. So when the opportunity came to participate in the Broadband Breakthrough program, we jumped at it. I was able to build a team of, you can see here, this is my little team. These are, I'm not going to bore you with all the acronyms. We don't have time for that anyway. So, but we had a good, solid team. We probably had, these are all different organizations that are local and regional. And all, for the most part, we had a pretty sizable ag presentation. Sorry, we had a large ag showing because we're 70%. Our 70% of our GDP is ag. We realized that our communities were had really great fiber internet service, really great broadband, but outside of the communities, even a half a mile, they were, again, broadband deserts. So what we did is we went through the program, the broadband breakthrough. We called it Better Broadband at first, so I keep go back to that sometimes. You can take a look. I'll make sure Ling Ling has our information for our website. This is my website, Hancock County Economic Development. If you just go to the broadband link, you can read up on it. Again, I won't read to you, but if you push on the Grow Hancock Broadband, it'll lead you to this sort of site within a site. And this really goes through our entire process. It was a 16-week program with the Broadband Breakthrough, pardon me. And this is a really interactive site. The entire thing basically offers you a little bit of education, why we need fiber, isn't Wi-Fi good enough? The rural divide really is something that I didn't even realize we were dealing with until I was going through this program. We were basically outside of the communities, we're basically unserved, not just underserved, which several of our communities still are underserved, because as anybody who knows anything about broadband, it's not fast. Getting it is, it's the talking about it's great. One of the things that the creator of this site, who was with WIRC but is no longer, did is his son was dealing with call zone war of duty Call of Duty Warzone, pardon me. And this will tell you how long it takes at what speed. So it just offers people a little bit of an idea of how quickly you need things. And it really was eye-opening because even looking at, I had several people asking me, well, I can't see this website because my internet is so slow. So one of the things that we did is we set out a survey. We had a survey statement. Again, I can share this with everyone. We were really blessed to have, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I think it was 503 unique locations, not just people, but unique locations throughout our community. And with a population of 17,000 plus, that's a huge amount. That was, I think, 3 or 4% of the population was sending us back information. And it really helped us realize that people are in desperate need of this. From our perspective, farming being such a huge issue, there's people who were getting, so we have a lot of hog farming here in Hancock County, and a lot of those hog farms are out in the middle of nowhere because no one wants to live next to a hog farm. And the reality is that a lot of those have had solar grants and other energy grants, and they need to have a return on data. So without Wi-Fi, a lot of them didn't even have enough Wi-Fi to return the data to from their grantees, so that they could even offer the information that they needed to report on. We went out and Shabika and her team were amazing. We worked with the University of Illinois Extension Office. We got so much great data. You can see here, Hancock County, who's served, who's underserved, who's unserved. And it was amazing just to see the information that we were getting. You can see everything in white here is basically, let's see, 100 to 20, 100 download up 20 upload speeds. It's not enough for what most people are needing. The survey analysis, there was so much that we learned about our communities and who wasn't getting it and who is. So as far as, I don't want to bore everybody with all of this. You can go through and look at it. I'm always going to be available. You can get to me through my site. You can get to me through Ling Ling. Shabika can give you all the information. I will say one of the things that we were able to accomplish is MTC, which is McDonough Telecommunications Corporation. They were able to receive a $16 million grant to expand fiber, pardon me, to rural communities, rural parts of Hancock County. NextLink was also the recipient of a grant to manage the point-to-point wireless, add some more towers, and help get that broadband information out there. From at this point, kind of our next steps are, we're just sort of waiting. Those grants are huge and they're super helpful, but again, broadband's not fast. Development is not fast. So we have to wait to be able to see who's going to be able to get there, who can do it fastest, and then what we can get from there. So we're constantly waiting and waiting for the next and the next and the next. But I do see we're out of time, and I don't want to keep everyone. I don't want to, but anybody who's interested in hearing more about our process, I'm happy to help. Sorry, I'm so rushed here. So.
Thank you so much, Sam. And again, my apologies for running over and having to rush both Kyla and Sam. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your expertise. I think this has been a wonderful presentation. I will be following up with a recap email with access to all the data, links, and resources and websites that our presenters shared. Finally, thanks to our U of I Extension partners for making this webinar possible, and I will hand over to Michelle to close us out.
Thank you, Ling Ling. Also, thank you to Shabika, Kyla, and Samantha, Sam, for all of your insight. It was great to learn more about how to create some compelling stories through data. We are staying online for any questions that you may have. Just drop them right there in the chat box. If you have questions, if you have comments, we would love to hear them. I will start by asking a question. Sam, you mentioned, and I guess any of us that live in more rural areas know that it can be hard to get responses when you're doing any kind of survey. Can you talk a little bit about how you conducted your survey to get the responses that you did?
So my husband's a school superintendent, and as the director of economic development here, I also work with a lot of the schools for workforce. So we were really grateful to the regional superintendent and each of the community school superintendents. They allowed us to put out information to each of their students, send home information, asking them to, talk to their parents. Hey, do you want to be able to download those games faster? Do you want to be able, do you want to be able to FaceTime with your friends, that type of thing? We really pushed it in the schools. We have a rural water department. We asked them to put it out in their bills and send it out to their clientele. We also have a rural electrical company. We have Ameren as well within the city limits of most of our communities, but outside of the city limits, our WIEC, Western Illinois Electrical Company, they were also doing water bills. They were doing, they were sending it out via email. We talked to each of the communities and their city clerks and said, hey, can you send this out? Whatever we could do, we talked to everybody. And we had so many different people from so many different wonderful, a lot of our largest employers sent it out to their staff. Everyone was on this. So it was really great getting the entire community involved.
So use your connections and come at it from different angles for the gamers, for the ones who want to FaceTime, and so on and so forth.
And I will say that I know that people kept saying, well, won't that double up on certain locations? It doesn't matter. They filter it out by address. So when I said 503 unique locations, that's not 503 people who took it. Sometimes 4 people took it from one location. There were other times, and I say the survey, we had speed tests, we had, questions about how they feel about their service, those types of things. So people could come at it from different angles as well.
That's really remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Nice job. And then I have one more question, and it is about storytelling and data and the balance between the two. So does anyone have any insight that they want to share on how much data is too much data? How much storytelling is too much storytelling?
Kyla, if you want to go, I'll leave that to you. You have probably more data than I do.
Well, certainly, for those who know me, I like a good story. So I share a lot of stories technically when I'm talking about this work. And I think that the stories is what engages people. And then once you have them engaged and interested in the work, because again, the classification of digital equity as a concept, it's new, but folks are maybe more familiar with digital skills, digital inclusion, or eliminate the digital divide. And there are people in our community that don't know what any of that even means. So when I share a story around, going to kindergarten and having my, speak and spell in my backpack, because it was my favorite toy, and that none of the kids in my classroom had never ever seen, electronic toy, nor could they afford one. And then how my father went and bought everyone a speak and spell because he felt bad for the other kids that couldn't have that experience. That then people start to see themselves in those kind of roles, or see themselves in the ecosystem in a different kind of way. So I say engage them first with stories so that they can find their place within this ecosystem, and then start layering on data, because data is intimidating. And now I like a good pivot table, I like a good Excel spreadsheet. That is like my life. but for some people it's intimidating and it draws them away from the work. And so I say, just be as smart as you can and as intentional as you can to share the data in a way that can be consumable for the audience. Everyone doesn't want to see all of the graphs and all the other things, but a nice, cool little picture with one little, percentage, statistic about something that matters to them in their community can go a long way.
I would absolutely agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that you can get really into the weeds with the data when you're a data nerd. And I am. So I'm with you. I have a really fun spreadsheet cup for my coffee in the morning. So anyway, but the one time I went to present at a community, and it's a village, and they have got this, very sweet group of people, and they were so excited to hear all about it, and they kept calling it the internet. And I was like, well, it's different than the internet. It's, you know what I mean? I was trying to explain to them what broadband was. That was very difficult. There's just so much more that I think people couldn't possibly, grasp all of. And so sometimes you really have to know your audience to tell the story and relay the data in a way that they can absorb. So, there were times where I would have to sit down. I mean, we had a speed test, and there were times where I'd get a phone call from, the little old lady down the street, and she's like, honey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to help. And I would ask her the questions, and I would take it myself with her address put in there. And I mean, there's so much to it that you can do to assist, to make it so that voices are heard. I think that that's really the important part about this as far as storytelling goes, making sure you're telling everyone's stories.
Excellent points. Shabika, did you have anything to add?
I think definitely we've heard from the community experts, so I wouldn't say it any better. 100% aligned and agreed with a lot of what Kyla and Sam just mentioned. Just wanted to say that, we here at the state are just trying to make sure we have all the resources for our communities, realizing that this can be a capacity a constraint for a lot of you as you're also working in the community, being able to find all of this and then work on the next step with analysis and storytelling can be a little time consuming and not something that all nonprofits and local governments have time for. So we're here to support you. If there's something you're looking for, definitely reach out to us, and we'll be able to help you with some of that data. And then the community the best. So crafting that story and getting people on board, we certainly want to help and engage everybody in the state as much as we can with their data requests. So, yeah.
And
Wonderful.
I cannot express how important that the help, the resources of the University of Illinois Extension Office, Zach, everybody was so amazing. We could not have done what we did without them. So thank you, Shabika. Thank you to your whole team. Thank you, Zach, who's had at least one long meeting with me and given me all kinds of wonderful data. So. Dream team's red.
All right, let's see. I don't see any questions, so I think we're good for now. I would like to ask if anybody has anything else to share that didn't get shared along the way. No.
I went ahead and put my information in the chat. I could probably talk on this for the full hour, so I really did dumb that down. If anybody has any questions, just contact me directly. I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, and I will also add my email in the chat box if anybody wants to reach out to me. But I will thank again everyone who participated today by presenting and answering questions. And it's very good information to have. We appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.